Hitchhikers, serial killer biopics, and vicarious embarrassment. Those are three topics I'm going to be talking about other than the movie I just watched. My name is Gavin, and this is Not Talking About. Okay, so I just watched the serial killer biopic, My Friend Dahmer, based off of Jeffrey Dahmer when he was a teenager, based off of a graphic novel. I don't have time to talk about it, though, because I need to be talking about hitchhikers. And you probably know hitchhikers as basically a form of getting to one place to another, hitchhiking, where one person would pick up the other person from the side of the road. A lot of times they'll just have the thumbs up. There's that famous scene, and It Happened One Night, where the guy put the thumbs up and the car would always pass, but then the girl came over, showed her legs a little bit, and then all the cars stopped right away. Back in the day, this was a very common way to get around, and nobody really thought of it. Everybody was more open to being around strangers, and everybody was afraid of other people. But obviously we live in a different age now, because people very much so look down upon hitchhikers, and it's illegal in a lot of areas on highways. I know that there's signs on I-80 where it's like, no hitchhikers allowed, but it's okay to pick up people on, like, in the middle of the city, but you can't do it on, like, the side of the highways, because not only is it dangerous to be walking on the side of the highway, but it's also dangerous to pick up someone that you have no idea who they are. They could be a normal person, or they could be a serial killer. We have no idea. And because of that whole stranger danger thing, it very much so could be a serial killer in the other car. But it's kind of surprising how hitchhiking has kind of come back in style due to things like Uber. The only difference between that and hitchhiking is mainly you are being paid, or you're paying someone to take you places. So it's basically like a taxi driver, but it's actually in a stranger's car. So it's slightly safer, but then you always come up with the problem that, is that person really my Uber driver, or is that actually someone just posing as an Uber driver to pick up the wrong person? I don't think that happens very often, but I feel like it could be possible if someone wasn't smart about it. And the biggest issue, or the biggest scare about hitchhikers, you don't know if that person's going to kill you. You know that there were horror movies like The Hitchhiker, where it was you were picking up a serial killer basically, and it even happened in like real life that you have someone like Jeffrey Dahmer picking up a hitchhiker, taking him back to his place, handcuffing him, making him pose nude, and then murdering him. That's not something that you really want to that's something that you want to be a part of. And that scene actually was not in My Friend Dahmer, because My Friend Dahmer is about when he was a teenager, and this was after that. But I don't really have time to talk about My Friend Dahmer, because I need to be talking about serial killer biopics. I mean, when it comes to serial killer biopics, we're kind of living in a golden age where everybody wants to learn more about killers. So it's kind of probably the reason why we're so obsessed with shows like Criminal Minds, Law and Order SVU, and we're making movies about different killers, or we're making movies about fictitious killers like Hannibal Lecter or Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers. And one of the problems I see to become an issue when it comes to serial killer biopics based on actual killers is we basically put in risk of glamorizing the killers and make someone want to actually do something in hopes that they'll become famous. When it comes to let's just say mass shooters in general right now, I don't think it's okay for newscasts to say the name of the killer or talk about the killer at all, because they should be focusing entirely on what happened and the victims of the tragedy. If you talk about the killer and try to learn more about them, all you're doing is basically showcasing them in hopes that or you're basically showcasing them in a way that it'll present to other people who potentially might be killers, to say, hey, if that person got a bunch of press coverage, maybe I will, so I should do the same thing. That shouldn't be allowed. I don't think that they should use the names, but focus entirely on the victims. Now, it's a little different when it comes to serial killers of the past because they've already been, I shouldn't say glamorized, but they are definitely presented in the news in a very, very notorious way. So these big names like Charlie Manson, who I know isn't necessarily a killer. He got other people to do the killers, but he's still notorious. Jeffrey Dahmer, Ed Gein. These are people that there have been various movies made by them. They've been very influential when it comes to cinema and the way that a lot of horror movies work, especially Ed Gein, because his story was really picked apart and then put into a lot of different movies. I think when it comes to serial killer biopics for killers of the past, there's a little different standard because a lot of them are already dead, and if they're dead, then obviously you can make a movie about it. I don't think that there's an issue with that because these people are already dead. It's not like you're giving them, making them famous. I guess in a way you're making them famous past the grave, but it's not like they'll be alive to know it. But when it comes to serial killers now that are still alive, it's a little different. I think you should be more cautious about it. I think it's fine when it comes to, like, a documentary maybe, but or a crime show. I don't think it should necessarily be their own movie though, because in a way you're presenting them in a light where they're the protagonist. I guess you would say that they're the antagonist, but they're the main character of the movie. You're entirely basing a movie based on someone that did something evil. It's kind of unfair that there's a lot of people doing good in the world, but we tend to focus on those that are the worst in the world. So there's going to be infinitely more movies on someone like Adolf Hitler than there is about Winston Churchill or Franklin Delano Roosevelt. It kind of is because he's just so notorious, and when someone is so evil, we really want to know why they're that evil. But when someone ends up being they change the world in a good way, people don't tend to care as much. Like, I know people like Mother Teresa and Gandhi, people look up to them, but you wouldn't go out of your way to learn literally everything about their life. But when it comes to someone like a serial killer, it's just we're obsessed with it. I have no idea if it's because we're just a violence-obsessed culture, we're desensitized to it, or if it's just, since it's just so out of the ordinary, we just are curious on why things work like that. Should serial killer biopics be allowed in general? I think yes, but you just need to be cautious about what you're doing with it. Do I think something like My Friend Dahmer would be it's fine? It's based off of a graphic novel based on someone who actually lived with Jeffrey Dahmer. But I'm not going to go into the whole what happened there with My Friend Dahmer, the book, anything like that, because I need to be talking about something I learned about today, which this fascinates me: vicarious embarrassment. Okay, so vicarious embarrassment is basically a reasoning why people don't like cringe. So, some people don't like cringe comedy. They'll try to watch it and they're just like, I can't watch this. This is like the hardest thing to watch. I can't do it. I can't handle it. It's because of vicarious embarrassment. It's a psychological reasoning why you can't watch a cringy situation. And the two explanations behind it is empathy and self-projection. Empathy is basically the ability to feel what other people are feeling. So when you're watching that cringy situation of a boy trying to talk to his crush and he can't speak, and you're just like, I don't want to watch this right now. It's so hard. Because of that, you could understand what he's going through and you can understand what she's going through, and it's just, it's an unbearable amount of sensations that occurs. And the second reason why some people don't like cringe comedy, the reason behind vicarious embarrassment, is self-projection, which is basically an out-of-body experience where you stop feeling yourself in this own situation and you start seeing yourself in that character's shoes, that you're no longer consciously in your own body, but you are in that character's body and you're feeling the sensations that they're feeling. Which I wonder if that's the reason why sometimes when I'm watching a movie and a character has to hold their breath under the water, that I start feeling like that I can't breathe because I feel like I'm underwater. It's probably because of something like this. Self-projection is probably not necessarily empathy, but it's definitely self-projection in that way. That's so weird that happens when that you're just watching a movie, but then you actually feel the things happening in real life. Very weird phenomenon. I very much so have vicarious embarrassment when I'm watching movies. I can't watch a lot of cringy movies. I can watch The Office. I don't necessarily find that cringy, but there's definitely scenes where it's really hard to watch. I really like coming of age movies, but unfortunately that genre has so many cringe scenes that whether it's a boy who likes a girl or someone that just gets up in the middle of the class and makes a fool of themselves, I can't watch when I'm watching those type of movies. I'll have to look away. Sometimes I'll like grab the seat and I'm like, I swear I'm not going to cringe at this. And then I'll just like squeeze the seat and then eventually I'll just have to look away because it's just so hard to watch. And sometimes the cringe can get so unbearable that I just have to get up and leave the room because it's just so awful. Like a scene in My Friend Dahmer that happens at a doctor's office where there is a hernia exam. But unfortunately, actually, I'm not going to be talking about that. I don't really want, because I am out of time. Thank you for listening to Not Talking About in this new form. It's podcast rather than over video. I think that's a little bit better because it's more in depth and I'm not as comfortable about a camera, but when it's in front of a microphone, I'm a little bit better. Not great, but just slightly a little bit better. So thank you for taking the time to listen, and I'll be back with a different movie next week. Peace.